Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Rouge Rugby podcast, where we focus on real Canadian rugby. I'm joined, as always, by Derek Brissett. Derek, it's been a bit of a rough weekend, I would say. We talked about it in the last episode of Canada going up against the world number ones, England, in the semi-finals of the Women's World Cup. And, it was definitely a good game. Both games of the semi-final actually were
both games were amazing.
Incredible to watch.
They were amazing.
Yeah, absolutely amazing to watch. But unfortunately, there's got to be a winner and there's got to be a loser. And when you're going up against a team that had, up until that point, gone 29 games unbeaten, you want to talk about momentum being with a team. It's definitely them. But, it was a result that I can definitely say that Canada should be proud of. They, of the four teams that were in the semi-final, they're the only team that isn't currently under a professional structure, and they were able to push England to within 7 points. But unfortunately, they came out the wrong end.
Yeah, and after the game stuff, Sophie De Goody obviously had her comments about the whole I'm paraphrasing what she said, but it was like imagine what we can do with like more resources and more time, more games, more resources. Right. So that's obviously something that people are talking about after this game. But yeah, both the semifinals in this one, phenomenal rugby games.
Absolutely.
Comparison to like the Autumn Nations Cup happened at the same time, and these were the two best games of the weekend, like easily.
Yeah.
And it might be like two of the best games ever, like any World Cup period too.
Mm-hmm.
And like you kind of said, like, I don't know, like, I think to me, it's like this whole tournament, it kind of like, it just kind of felt destined to be an England-New Zealand final.
Yeah.
And like Canada and France played great games in both of these. And like you kind of look at like Canada, as you just said, Canada loses by 7. The difference in that game is arguably the greatest try ever scored from Abdow. And then you look at the difference in the New Zealand France game is Drouin missing a kick at the death. A very makeable kick too. Right. And so yeah, it was a wild games. We'll get into the analysis. Like, I think, like watching Peltier toss that like ball like over 3 or whatever three like English defenders to Corrigan for that try that tied the game. Probably the most fun I think I have ever had watching a Canadian national team.
Yeah.
Like, just in that moment, like that was incredible. It was amazing. Like you said, like, you obviously like at the end of the game kind of hope you want Canada to win and stuff, but yeah, like you said, like you can't like it's obviously a team that Canadian rugby fans can be incredibly proud of right now. They put in an unreal effort. And it was like it's one of those, like, that game was like it's an instant classic. There's probably 2 like try of the tournaments in it. And we can get into it. I guess it's going to be the bulk of our episode getting into this one. It's probably one of the best games of all time. Certainly one of the best women's games of all time. So, it's unfortunate that the scoreboard wasn't a little bit more favorable at the end of it. But it's incredible.
Yeah, it's kind of like mixed feelings about it, because there were 2 just simply phenomenal games that we got to witness. It's showing you how far things have come in women's rugby over the past I was going to say 4 years, but obviously 5 years, because this World Cup's been taking place in a year after it was meant to. Demonstrable proof of how professionalism has impacted the sport, and how has allowed these teams to be able to put on such great matches. But we need to get into it, the game. So England obviously coming in, they're favourites to win the tournament.
Yeah.
And so they're obviously favourites to beat Canada, and the favourites for the semi-finals as well. It didn't really start well in Canada's favour. The first try coming from Packer, within like the first 10 minutes. And then Abby Dow getting the second try of the game and for England in the 15th minute, with Emily Scarrett's getting only one conversion to make it 12-0 before even at the 20-minute mark. But then 4 minutes later, we have a fantastic also play going on when Justine Pelletier was able to break free from the scrum, shoot ahead, and then seemed to be kind of like a repeat of last week, in which the ball gets kicked further down the field and Karen Paquin is able to beat the defenders and get her hands on the ball first. And that is Canada's first try of the game. So, back in it with at the 20-minute mark, and then able to hold it off until, as you were mentioning, the long pass out to Corrigan, who's able to then get the second try. De Goody able to get that conversion after missing Paquin's conversion. So we're now 12-all. And then just before halftime, Canada concede a penalty, which Scarrett is able to then kick over to make it only 3 points in it. So 15-12. Then as we get into the second half, another penalty, again in front of the post, that allows Scarrett to extend the lead. And then soon enough, we get onto Dow's second try, which, I think it's probably the clearest example of the difference between a professional side and a semi-pro at best side. To take that ball, force the turnover with Canada in England's 22, get it out wide, and then able to streak from one end of the field to the other to score the try. And it was kind of, at that point, the game was firmly in England's hands going on. But only one reprieve was that the conversion was unable to be scored. And then we had Cornborough getting yellow carded for England, so England down to 14 players. But, still, again, fully pro side, they've been able to handle the pressure from Canada. And in those 10 minutes that Cornborough was off the field, Canada were unable to get a single point. So, obviously things weren't working well. And then finally, when the bench starts to get on the field, Bookaboom set up a great try that she also finished as well. And this brought Canada back within 4 points. But then 3 minutes later, another penalty is conceded. Scarrett's able to kick over, so it's 7-point difference. Canada go again, getting into England's half, keep pushing, but get counter-rucked. Then they have a line out just within the not Canada, England's 22, and that's thrown and it's not straight, and then the ball immediately goes over to England, who were able to basically retain possession and then kick the ball out at the end. The final score: England 26, Canada 19, and yeah, all the players just left it all out on the field. When that final whistle blew, even the England players had to muster the energy to celebrate it, because Canada had drained them so much, and Canadian players were, bunched over, obviously upset at the loss, but there's really nothing more that you could say that Canada could have done to do that with the resources they already have. Like Kevin Rouet, you mentioned about Sophie de Goody in her interview after the game, but Kevin Rouet was also explaining it as well, that these players have left full-time work, they've left studies, they've had to basically source their own income through like GoFundMe's and stuff to be able to train. And obviously every player is incredibly passionate about representing Canada, playing for Canada in the World Cup, but that can only do so much. And and I know there's people at Rugby Canada that listen to this podcast and watch what we do, and when we talk about things like this, the ideal opportunity to fund the women's players was 3 years ago, same time as England. The next best opportunity is now. because we got 3 years until the 2025 World Cup, in which we've seen basically all the teams of the Women's Six Nations are now starting to professionalize their teams. We've got the Pacific Fours Championship with, New Zealand already going down the way of professionalism. I'm pretty sure Australia is going to follow as well. The USA should as well. We've also got the WXV coming up. And there's going to be a huge disparity between the teams that do go the route of professionalism and those that don't. So I know it's probably going to have to require a lot of investment and a lot of research into which sponsors you can get, but clearly it needs to be done. Because if players are able to do what Canada has done so far and go up against the best team in the world that has been professional longer than any other team in women's international rugby and only fall by 7 points.
7 points on the greatest try arguably ever scored.
Yeah. But listen, if Canada was professional, that try wouldn't have been scored.
I mean, that's a big what if though. Like that was a great try.
It is big what if, but it's also one of the things of like when you are
like what
such a close margin, when you're in a converted try.
Okay, so
of tying the game, absolutely.
I know, but like I get your point overall, but what happens differently on that play if Canada's paid more and plays more? Like, what happens differently on that play?
So in the same way that England players have been in professional environments, they've been able to, focus on recovery, focus on training. Canadian players are just, they can run a little bit faster under pressure. They're able to utilize tackles a lot better. I'm saying this as though it's like, oh, it's so obvious. The reality is that all the little things that you don't really notice until they actually happen become slightly better. So if you and it's just like simple things. If you're spending more time focusing on sprints, for example, then your top speed increases, your acceleration increases. You're able to get closer to other players that are a lot faster, quicker. And it's these little like gaps in margin, like any of the missed tackles under a professional environment suddenly don't become missed tackles because you spent more time training on how to tackle and how to improve like grip strength, something as simple as that. And then you can like hold onto a player's jersey a lot tighter. You can hold on to their.
Gotta be able to touch the player first.
That is true, but it's all the things that was actually the thing.
It's like when we went back to a couple of weeks ago and we were arguing what is a missed tackle.
Yeah,
it's like is there a missed tackle on that play?
Probably not. But the thing as well is that to get Dow's second try, England forced a turnover. Mm-hmm. And if you've been in an environment in which you're learning how to avoid that ball doesn't get turned over. I'm not saying it's then not England don't then force a penalty or anything like that and then get the ball and then Dow scores a try that way. But it's like I said, it's those little things. It's basically the tightening of a screw. Everything just gets a little more refined. It just allows you to go that little bit further, run that little bit faster, hit that ruck a little bit earlier. These things come into play.
I'm just giving you a bit of a hard time. I don't think
it's funding.
I don't know how much funding would directly impact if a try got scored or not. But like, I think the point, at least to me, it seems like the point that I think you're trying to make, or at least how I'm interpreting it, is like, Canada's close to being the best team in the world. Yeah. Right. And it's like they kind of showed that in this game. They showed that throughout the tournament. And I think, like you said, it's like they put in an absolutely unreal performance against the team that is clearly the best team in the world. If they end up winning this World Cup, it's going to be 31 straight test matches, like an unprecedented record. And that's like that England is insanely good, right? Yes. Part of that is, as you kind of said, they got obviously they have a pro league over there. They have more of a pro setup and stuff. And the rest of the world is a little bit behind on that, but it does seem like they said, like for Canada, the USA, Australia, France, any of those other countries, it's like this kind of feels like, one of those things where it's like if all these countries kind of dive into professionalizing women's rugby more funding, more resources and stuff, this could get like insanely competitive and be like unreal, like international competition at the top. I mean, I tweeted after the game that I'm just going to call it now that Canada's going to win the 2025 World Cup. But in order for that to happen, like as Sophie de Goody kind of mentioned, right, it's like you're probably going to need a little bit more resources and stuff to do it. It would be nice as like, obviously there's a handful of Canadian players that play in the English league as well. So it'd be nice to see a few more head over there. Right. As well as, hopefully, being able to get the national team together a little bit more frequently would be good as well. And just to be able to give everybody more, it's the exact same thing we've been talking about, like the men's team and everything with MLR, right? It's just get everybody more game time and pay enough that you don't necessarily need another job. In saying that, I know obviously a lot of MLR players have other things that they do too. But like have that, the very least be able to, like, if you're in camp, you can focus on rugby and you don't have to worry about whatever else you're doing. I think that would be great because they showed that they're close. And I mean, and it's everything. Like this game was just like amazing, like all around. And because obviously, like, you got England gets out to that 12-0 lead. A couple like Dow's first try too was I mean, he had Packer's first try. Good work from the English forwards, right? Just kind of breaking down the Canadian defense there. Dow's first try was an unreal counter attack from Roland. And then, pass off to Dow again, who just has unreal speed, as you kind of mentioned there, Stu. And like for Canada to be able to kind of look at that, and then, the Karen Paquin try was like just that set piece from like whatever 35-40 meters out from their own try line. Peltier's ability to just kind of spot that gap, shoot through it, and that kick under pressure from the English backs there, like that kick under pressure was just could not have been better. Like it couldn't possibly have been a better kick than that. It was perfect. Ball sits up just over the line. Paquin kind of like very similar to that try she scored last week with the Allery kick through. So like that was just, it was perfect, right? And that obviously sparked a lot of life into the Canadian team. And you said it's like that moment too where it's off the line out with the forwards kind of driving at the English line, and then like Peltier kind of breaking away from the ruck. So de Goody actually passes it to Peltier in like it's kind of like a 10 first receiver kind of spot. And then that pass from Peltier that just she airmails it over everybody to Corrigan. Was like, that was one of that's probably going to be like, that's one of like the best moments in Canadian rugby for like the past like 5-10 years right now. Like it was like just a phenomenal play. And it was like, it's funny because it was like watching this game, like I generally like take notes on games as I'm watching them. And I looked back at was looking back at the notes like after the game just for what happened, and I kind of like use it as like reference when we're recording this. My note for this was I forgot to write anything. And I literally wrote after. I was like, during halftime, I was like, I was too hyped. Corrigan scored. And then like, that's my note for the try. Cause I was like too excited cheering or whatever, throwing out like tweets and stuff. And I mean, I think most of my tweets for that try were just like Canadian flags and Predator gifs. So, I mean, it's like, that's what it was. And I mean, it was like one of those things. I feel like it was like going into the game. It's like, as you said, England's the huge favorite, and it's like everyone's obviously cheering for Canada, but like that try to me, like it felt like like the third round of like a Rocky movie, where it's like
Yeah.
Rocky's just been getting beaten up for 2 rounds, and then in the third round they finally have Rocky like land something, and like Drago gets cut, or like Clubber Lang kind of like stumbles or whatever, and then like you get like the realizing Rocky realizing that he could actually win this, and then they go through like the montage for the next 10 rounds or whatever. And it's like that kind of felt like that moment of just like the collective, like, oh my god, like Canada can win this game. And it made the second half so much better too. And it was, it also is like there's so many like just great moments in all from this game, like whether it's just like, players making really nice runs, nice tackles. Like it was so close, everything too. And like you said, I mean, like that, like when you get into the game and like Canada's pressing at like that 50th minute, where like what was it before that second Dow try, like 20 phases or something? Like,
Yeah,
it's wild. And
definitely
it was
a
like just
considerable number.
the ball retention was perfect. And like watching Canada just slowly like grind all the way down into England's end. And it was just like watching watching the turnover. You're like, oh dang, like that's a bad spot to turn the ball over, right? Or unfortunate. And then you see McDonald basically take off from her own in goal area. And if there's a step on the first defender, there's the step on Tessier where there's the one where the step where the two Canadian defenders collide, right? And then a pass to Dow, and it's like a track meet at that point. And like it's one, like we said, it's one of the best tries ever. And like unfortunately, like ultimately the difference of the game, but we also still didn't realize that would be the difference of the game yet, because there was time. And then you had like the Buka boom, you had the huge break, in which she ultimately finished after some other great plays from the forwards. But yeah, just like overall, it was just like every player in the game, like you can't even really like complain about like any player in the game, like what they did and stuff. I mean, you got like there's a couple moments and things like looking at it, and it's like, yeah, like the yellow card is probably a moment I'm sure everybody this team would like back a little bit, where it's like the maul's working well, England can't bring it down, or England can't really stop it, so they're bringing it down. Ref finally pulls out the yellow, and then the next line out's not straight.
Yeah.
Which that one kind of hurt. I mean, like that one kind of hurt. And then obviously, like even like that, the play before Dow's try, it's like that's a lot of phases to turn the ball over on the goal line and have that immediately go back for a try, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's a big fight. That's a big that's a big point swing there instantly as well. So it's like, you kind of look at it and it's like, yeah, that yellow card too, after that missed line out, that the Canada didn't capitalize on it. No points during that yellow card, which, is something that you got to do. And I mean, like, it's like the reality too, a little bit of like, England's defense in this game was great.
Yeah.
Toward the end, I know some folks certainly had some issues maybe with the way the rucks were being called, and like how the breakdown in general was being officiated. But it's like, there's probably a couple where like England, maybe they're lying on top of the ball a little too much, or a hand stayed in the ruck a little too long or something like that. But I don't know. It's at the end of the day, I guess, like from an English point of view, if the ref's not calling it, you're going to keep doing it, right? So,
Yeah.
it's which is that's rugby, I guess, sometimes, right?
Yeah.
And so like England did well to kind of play to how the ref was calling that game, right? So, and they got a couple massive turnovers, turnovers that led directly to tries, or turnovers that just like there was a couple, they had a couple like two or three maybe like good goal line stands. I mean, one ended up in the try, but there was at least two other ones there where Canada just couldn't push the ball over. So it's like, I think to circle back to I think what your point was, is it's like you can look at this game and be like, it's not only that like Canada could have like hung around with England in this game or kept it close or whatever. It was like Canada had opportunities to score or like that possible, to score a couple tries, which could have been the difference in the other way. But like, England shut it down, right? Like you have to give credit to English defense at some point in this game.
Yeah,
they stopped a couple like legit opportunities. And I mean, if one of those goes through, like, if one of those goes through, then, maybe this game looks a little bit different, especially that one that ended up being Dow's second try, right? Like if that's a Canadian try instead, then, that's all it would have taken, right? If that's the other way. So it's like, it's a game of inches sometimes, and something, I guess, a couple bounces didn't necessarily go, but it's just phenomenal. It was so much fun watching the game, man. Right, which is something that it's nice to like saying, I guess, about Canadian rugby in general right now, is that it's this team has been really fun to watch over the course of the entire World Cup. And I'm sure they're going to continue to be really fun to watch going into the next going into this bronze medal game. And hopefully, with a match against France, who are obviously coming off their own heartbreaking loss in their own right. So that bronze medal game, what is it, 10:30 on Friday night? Yeah. And like, I think that's going to be great. It's going to be on TSN again. And I think like one thing I do kind of like want to mention too, like it's like it's cool to kind of see like, as the course of this tournament has gone on, like the team kind of slowly growing and getting a little bit of publicity and stuff. Whether that's from the Canadian media or like international media. Everybody seemed to love that Squidge Rugby video, kind of breaking down the team, which was awesome. There's been some Rugby Pass stuff, some Guardian stuff. He's putting up some stuff. The Gist here is picking it up a lot. So that's all really kind of cool to see. And I think like on Saturday, I was actually in a bar Saturday afternoon, and they had a replay. TSN was showing like a replay of the game. Right. And it was like, it was on like a few of the TVs. There was obviously college football and some hockey on, but it was cool to see, like, I don't think I've really ever seen rugby on TV in like a Canadian bar, unless it was like, going to like a place that was specifically holding like an event to show rugby games or whatever. Or it was just kind of like, this game was just kind of casually on. And I think the cool thing too, as the game was on, is like you can kind of tell like people in the bar were like actually like watching it. Or like paying attention to and kind of reacting to it and stuff, which is honestly like really cool to see. And I hope like it does kind of show like the importance of having some of these games on a channel like TSN that can just be like left on at a lot of bars and stuff. And that goes for like the arrows on like TSN as well. Like, just if the MLR games are going to be on TSN, then like, yeah, like it's going to end up on, like, that's kind of the benefit of being on that national channel. So like, but the other thing is though too, is it's like, I think ultimately, we could talk about like how great this team is, how great a lot of the players are and stuff. And, you're talking about like, we got to get more like resources and funding and stuff. And it's like, I kind of hope that like we as like a rugby community can find a way to like capitalize on this team. Right. Both in the sense of like just visibility for the sport and stuff, and also like, hopefully like commercially as well. This is like, as much as we're like saying that like we need to put more resources obviously into the women's team, which is 100% true. It's like, we got to get the resources from somewhere too, right? So more growth just in rugby and the program and stuff needs to happen. And it's like, also, I think there's also needs to be that realization that it's not going to just instantly happen because the team has success. Because like, there's like, I've been kind of trying to think about this as well too. And it's like, if like thinking about how I react to like other sports, like rugby's still a niche sport in this country. Right. So it's like, you got to find a way to like build on this team and continue to market and all that, but you got to put a lot more into it than hoping that we win. Right. Because just winning is not necessarily enough. Right. Because it's like, at the end of the day, there's a lot of people that are going to be like, see that Canada, let's let's be optimistic, may win a bronze medal at the Rugby World Cup. And people will see that. It'll be on TSN. It'll show up on like all these other sports feeds and stuff. That'll at least give the shout out for them winning. And it's like there has to be a way that we can turn like that little bit of nice exposure and stuff into actually growing the interest, instead of people just kind of reacting like how you and I would probably react if we found out that Canada just won the World Cup of water polo, which would most likely just be like, oh, that's neat, and move on with our lives.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like, so I would love to, like, I think this is going to be kind of a big opportunity, and as Canadian rugby fans and stuff, it's like we need to kind of like put that effort into like growing the game. But it's, it's not all just going to be like, it's not all necessarily just going to be based on like the performance and stuff. It's like, but like this team is amazing, and we should be able to like leverage, like there's no reason why like Sophie de Goody shouldn't be like a superstar athlete in Canada.
Yeah.
Right. And that's just like how that should be. Like we should hopefully be able to transition that, and because like her story is amazing too, right? Just even simply the fact that it's like her mom and dad were both captains of World Cup teams as well. Like it's like a little like the family dynasty element of that is a cool story, right? So it's like you should be able to like market these players and stuff, and turn this into like something special. And I hope that team does. And I just hope we're able to like kind of capitalize on it. And hopefully like things like this podcast and stuff can help, because I like. It's a great sport. This team's amazing. With that being said, this team's amazing. The women's sevens, the men's sevens, the men's 15s. It's like all these teams all deserve, like all those athletes put so much work and stuff into it that it's like they all kind of deserve the recognition for it. It's nice to see the women's team getting it right now. And hopefully, the other teams will also kind of be able to follow with that. But yes. But either way, ultimately, we got to get more resources in on this team, because this could be a huge opportunity for us.
Absolutely. And as I mentioned last week, because Canada reached the semi-finals, they have qualified automatically for the next World Cup. So that's
the next World Cup.
England.
Oh, cool. That's so fun.
Yeah, so that works out, I think.
Better time zone.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think that's going to be a big help of getting recognition within Canada, is that if the games aren't at, 10:30 or 1 a.m. or things like that, more people are going to likely be able to watch it. As well as that, because they've qualified automatically, they don't have to worry about qualification through regional competitions as well to get their place, which, I'm not saying that the USA will be in that situation, because it's very complicated with this WXV allowing qualification for the World Cup as well, but it's not been defined. All that's been defined now is that the hosts, who are currently in the final this World Cup, means that they've already automatically qualified. So it's for Canada, it means that instead of these games that are going to come up where you may have to play against other North American teams or South American teams to be able to qualify for the World Cup, which is what the men have been doing, you can turn your focus to attracting potential new sponsors, anything that, even if you have to just do like sponsor a player, which I know that's a lot of which does happen even at both like club and international level, even for men's teams as well. So you have those options, those gateways to go through as well. And it's not just us, it's like people across it. It's Squidge Rugby and Squidge Rugby and his brother, because his brother narrated the Canada video. So Will, I think is his name. Will, so he's the one who's been doing the heavy lifting. I can't believe Squidge didn't even put Canada as potential champions. Absolute disgrace. And but in all seriousness, I know there's people like Scrum Queens as well, who have been championing.
Fun to follow during this.
They've been championing women's rugby for far longer, and some of the ideas is like, I think what Rugby Canada should be doing, even in like the short term, is getting in contact with every team in the Premier 15s, the the W Series in Australia, Elite 1 in France, and Super Rugby Aupiki in New Zealand, be getting in contact with those team managers and saying that, yeah, if you're looking for this position, or if like a new team is going to be joining, we've got some players for you. Just get them into a professional environment as soon as possible. Now, obviously, I know that we have like a fair bunch of the Canadian team have been playing in both the Premier 15s, and a few of the Quebec-based players have some experience in Eliton. So, yeah, it's not out of the realm of possibility. But I mean, for example, Super Rugby Aupiki only has 4 teams at the moment. If they want to add a couple more teams and maybe get a few Canadians in them, I mean, I'm not going to say no to that. But
I mean, I think that's kind of the thing right now. It's like this tournament, in all honesty, has been so much fun. We kind of talked about like, no matter like if you're just a rugby fan, like these, especially like these semi-final games were unreal. They were so good. You had obviously, we just talked at length about the Canada game, right? Couple like all-time great tries in that from Paquin and Dow. And then obviously, you know, Canada, you had like the cool storyline in the game, right? Canada was down 12-0, they came back to tie, and then like both teams kind of traded punches a little bit, and then ultimately England pulled away. But and then like you have the France-New Zealand game, which was kind of the same thing, right? France got out to a big lead. New Zealand came back. You know, they scored a try to give themselves a 1-point lead. Then they just kind of battled for the last 20 minutes, and the game ended on a really dramatic kick. Right? Phenomenal games. And it's like, I think right now what you're kind of seeing is like, I mean, we're talking about Canada, you know, like, right? And we were talking about how they need to like invest in this women's team and stuff. But it's like world rugby as a whole, like just go head first into women's rugby. Like dive in, like get the resources, get some of like those pro leagues and stuff off the ground. Because it's like it's gonna be needed, but it's also like, you know, it's one of those things too where it's like rugby is like one of the very few like full contact women's sports as well.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like that's like an area that it's like for people that really want to, you know, play something like rugby's like one of the very few options, right? Like especially like even like we'll come back to Canada, like women's hockey has no body checking, right? Like it's like, you know what I mean, like so it's, you know, and obviously there's contact in women's hockey and stuff, but it's like if to anybody that wants to play like a super physical game, it's like rugby's like your best option, right? So that's, you know, that's something that I think like you can kind of use and like market towards people that may be interested in playing that. But yeah, also like you said, like grow the women's game a lot and stuff. And like, you know, like, you kind of look at like Alicia Corrigan played with the Saracens, right? And then like, you know, earned her way onto this team, and like look what she did at this tournament, right? Let's like you can have like so many players, like just I'm excited for like, in all honesty, like this tournament more than anything, and like I'll fully admit like it's probably the first women's World Cup that I've really paid attention to. Like, you know what I mean? Even going back to that 2014 one. But the quality of rugby in this game is phenomenal. In this tournament's been phenomenal. Like even like going from like whether those teams are like the top 4 teams that made the semifinals, or even just like pool stage games between teams that, you know, were fighting to not be like 0-3 in the pool stage. The games have been incredible. Across the board, some unreal tries, some unreal stories with the athletes themselves. And you know, it'd be great to like, I'm excited for like the future of women's rugby right now, because it's like it's been phenomenal. And you know, like as you said, it's like, you know, it's starting to kind of become, I guess, professionalized across the board. And there's some really great leagues and stuff that hopefully a lot of these players can find themselves in going forward. And like just develop the sport, because like this tournament's been we're not done, the tournament's not over, there's still like there's another game, we have another Canada game. You know, we get to see them go out on a high note, and then obviously like England, New Zealand in New Zealand, like damn, that's gonna be so good.
Yeah, you say that, but I have a feeling that if you're a fan of like women's rugby and been following like the history of the World Cup, this will now be the 5th iteration of New Zealand and England contesting the final.
That's fun.
And
So good. It's gonna be this is your,
and every single time that fixture has come about, New Zealand have won it. So
and that like, New Zealand at home is an X factor on its own too, though.
Well, that's the thing. You say, oh, New Zealand at home would be England at home would be an X factor, but in 2010, when it was held in England, New Zealand won 13-10. And saying that, a bit of foreboding is that France and Canada have faced off in the bronze medal game twice before and have lost both times to France. However, the first time
that'll change.
Well, the first time was in 2002. France won 41-7.
Yeah.
So that is a winning margin of 34 points. But the next time they faced, which was in the next tournament in 2006 in Canada, France won only by 9 points. So with a 17-8 victory. So by that transitive property, Canada should win by a lot. So
hopefully that'd be cool.
Yeah. Well, I think, are France able to push New Zealand, and if that kick had gone slightly more to the right, then it would have been a England-France final. France would have made the final for the first time in their history.
Man, so, like, I just, that's one of those, I just feel bad for Drouin on that. Like,
yeah,
it's got to be. It's one of those things where it's like rugby is like the ultimate team sport, but it's like that is such like an individual element of this game.
Yeah,
is that kick, and it's
I felt bad as well.
I know. I was like, the camera like panned to her after, and I'm like, oh, I you feel bad like watching like the France reaction after, because it's like, yes. Oh man, it's heart it's heart-wrenching.
Yeah,
like I said, it's like it's the ultimate team game, but it's like that comes down to one person doing one thing.
Yeah, it's
tough.
Yeah. Well, a chance of redemption for both teams this Friday when it will be Canada versus France for the bronze final, and then I believe it's at 2:30 in the morning. Again, once the bronze final's been on, don't worry about it. Doesn't matter anymore. But apparently, England and New Zealand will play for the Cathy Flores Cup, as I'm calling it, to become the.
Has that been catching on at all? Have you seen literally anyone else use that term?
I haven't seen anyone else call it anything else. So I think I'm making some headway. I'll get back to you on that. All right, we've talked about the women's team for quite a bit, but there were some of the rugby things going on as well involving Canada. And we were very lucky to get this bit of news just before we recorded the podcast here on Monday, the 7th of November. Kingsley Jones has announced his 32-man squad for the autumn test taking place in Amsterdam. Remember, they are playing the Netherlands and Namibia, both at the Amsterdam Stadium. And they did announce a long list earlier in the week. However, it was a reduction of, I believe, only 4 names. So it went from 36 to the 32 that is in the squad. The 4 that excluded are Alex Russell, Deshaun Bowen, Dawson Fatorik, and Peter Nelson. Either way, we do have some interesting names in. So Matthew Klimchuk, Owen Rattan has been included in this squad as well, having recently played in the America's Rugby Trophy tournament. So this may be an opportunity for Rattan to get his first actual cap with Canada. So we'll see. Of course, this game will be played on, I believe it's 8:30 a.m.
9:30.
It's 9:30. No, it's the because daylight savings have happened and mobile clocks all over. But yeah, both games will be played at 9:30 a.m. They're against Netherlands on November 12th and against Namibia on November 19th. At the time of recording, broadcast details are to come. However, considering how things have been going so far, it seems as though the senior men's and women's games have both been on TSN this year. So we're hoping it'll be TSN again. But again, we will let you know when we do. So also making his way back into the men's senior squad, Andrew Coe is back after taking a little break over the summer and for the rugby trophy competition. Shane O'Leary is still in the squad as well. And Piers von Dadelsen is taking some time from Oxford University to play in the squad. And yeah, we got some good names. It's weird seeing names that were once attached to LA now listed as unattached. That just like Ben Lesage, although he's listed as Calgary Canucks. This is still very weird because Owen Rattan, who has been announced as signing for Toronto, is still listed as UBC. So
yeah,
make of that what you will.
Yeah, and you got Sears Duru says unattached. Lindsay Stevens though, we got Eastern Suburbs for Lindsay Stevens though.
Because Netherlands are currently ranked below Canada, but this is also the first time that they play. It may be, similar to the ART, and he goes with like a mix of senior as well as like new faces, as well. And as long as you keep the bench loaded with, senior, or I should say, reliable players more than senior players.
I think I would go. Yeah. I kind of like that. I would kind of go with that route. I mean, I know these are test matches.
Yeah.
I know these are test matches, and I know that it's gonna affect the world rankings depending on the results, and I know that is important. But I think if you're Canada now, I think the focus is still the future and developing players and stuff. And I mean, quite frankly, no matter what we have been saying about Rugby Canada's men's team for the past couple of years here or whatever, they should beat the Netherlands. It's it should be.
Yeah. But that's kind of like what I'm saying is because it's the Netherlands, because it's a lower ranked team, maybe gives the new guys a try, get them proper. And then Namibia, who is technically ranked lower than Canada, but only by one spot, and Namibia have also qualified for the World Cup. That is the game where you have more familiar faces.
I mean, truthfully, I think I would ultimately like to see. I would like to see some of these. How many guys are on this team? 32.
Yeah,
I don't really expect everybody to play over those two games, but I would like to see a handful of the Botchers, the Klimchuks, kind of get into these games too, right?
Yeah.
Or guys like Connor Young, fascinating, right? Considering New England signed him, he's from Australia, Canadian eligible though. That's a guy too that I'm that'd be fascinating. I think to kind of see how he goes in a test match as well. And I mean, a lot of players like that. I guess a couple of the Pacific Pride guys. Even some of these 7 guys like Mora, I think would be fascinating to kind of see him on the wing for a full proper test match. And then, I mean, Namibia is obviously going to be a big game too. That's going to be an important one, and that's a little bit of carryover from the 2019 World Cup on that, just because it's the game that never happened. So hopefully,
exactly.
So I mean, it's going to happen now, and I mean, these should be. I still think these should be some pretty entertaining games for the men's team.
Yeah.
Hopefully, the sign of turning a new leaf for them, and maybe ride a little bit of the wave of the excitement everybody has for the women's team right now, and put in a couple some back-to-back solid games here, and can start looking start kind of looking forward to the future of this club too, and hopefully it'll be give us reasons to be just as excited as we've been this entire podcast.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It should be definitely one that's worth waking up for. Now, with all this stuff of some games in New Zealand, some games in Europe, we have some games have been happening in Asia, because we have had the first round of the World 7 series in Hong Kong. And, Canada were in a pretty tough group. I mean, it seems as though because of all the quality of the teams, every group they're in is in a tough group, featuring Argentina, Ireland, and Kenya. Didn't start well, 36-0 loss to Argentina, then a narrow 19-17 loss to Ireland, before finally concluding the pool stage with a 19-14 win over Kenya. And then in the Sunday round of fixtures, again, I say Sunday, it was more like the 3 a.m. on Saturday for us on the East Coast. A 1917 win over the hosts, Hong Kong, and then a close 17-12 win over Great Britain. And in the 9th place playoff, now, this seems really confusing when I say it on paper, but of all the teams they were facing for 9th, I did not expect it to be New Zealand. Yet, here we are. And unfortunately, that was a 33-5 loss to the Kiwis. So Canada finishing in a 10th place. Obviously, would prefer to be 8th or higher, which would then determine that they were in the top half of the table. But I mean, if New Zealand's 9th, finishing 10th isn't that bad, I gotta say. Focus on the other Americans teams playing. Argentina, they finished 5th, and USA finished 6th. But this is just the first round of, I believe, 11 rounds for the men in the World 7 Series. And the next round coming up will be on Dubai on December the 2nd and 3rd for us in Canada, at least. Now we're moving on to MLR news, and we're starting off, of course, with the Toronto Arrows. The first announcement this week is that scrum half Cole Brown has re-signed for MLR 2023. He only had the opportunity to play in one game. That was against New York at York Lions Stadium. Was able to get a try on debut, unfortunately picked up an injury. And as we know from the scrum half curse of 2022, with the Toronto Arrows, that was his only appearance of the season. So he's hoping that that curse has been lifted. He's able to remain fit, and hopefully he can be scoring more tries on the games in MLR 2023. Now, Arrows fans, there was it was technically a re-signing, but this guy has been out of MLR for quite a few years. It is the return of the Oiterman Empire to Toronto after completing his studies at Cardiff Met University in Wales. Avery Oiterman has returned not only to the Toronto Arrows, but MLR as well. And this was just it feels weird to think that he last played in 2019, because 2019 feels like a lifetime ago.
It feels so long ago.
Avery, if you're listening, we'd love to have you on the podcast at some time to talk about your experience being a Cardiff Met, and to welcome you back to Toronto as well, because this was a great sign to hear.
Yeah, no, it's exciting to have the guy that's faster than a bald man's haircut back. It's an all-time classic call from Dan Power there. Obviously Oiterman, I think, was one of the more exciting players that the Arrows had in 2019, and the Arrows press release makes it sound like he hasn't played in like 3 years. So very, very interesting. I'm happy he's back and stuff, and I guess we'll see how he goes. Because I think, like, based on what he did in 2019, like, this could be a national team player. He brings back that form. He led the team in try scoring during that. I believe he was tied with Dan Moore for the team lead.
I think he was one off Dan Moore, so he was the second highest try scorer for the Arrows in 2019.
Okay, and I think it's exciting to have him back, and obviously it's a big name, it's a cool nickname. He had Oiterman Empire, it's a cool nickname and stuff. Obviously, he's a pretty marketable player. He had some fun like post-match interviews and stuff during his year here as well. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I think everyone kind of remembers that game against San Diego, where he had the 2 tries. Which was obviously critical for the Arrows' playoff hopes at that time too. So I mean, excited to have him back, and looking forward to his return to the blue and white, and on to more MLR 2023 news, because things start getting kind of wild, and I may have to retract things that I said last week.
When you say kind of wild, it seems as though we've been stuck in the Wild West of news and stuff. So it's been announced that the dispersal and expansion drafts will be held on the same day, on November the 10th. That's this Thursday. So either when this podcast comes out or shortly afterwards. And it seems to be doing in 5 rounds. The first 2 rounds will be dispersal. The third round will be the expansion draft, and the fourth and fifth round will be the continuation of dispersal. Now, this information we've gotten from John Hooley, or at Hooley John on Twitter. And so for the dispersal draft, it says 72 players from LA, and Austin, so 38 from LA and 34 from Austin. Franchises will be allocated in the Premier League list for the dispersal draft. These players have the right to opt out of the dispersal draft, as the final list of players will be released to the existing MLR teams and Chicago on November 9th. However, if a player opts out of the dispersal draft, they cannot sign with an MLR team till the halfway point of the 2023 season. And we'll talk about this in a moment. Each existing franchise will get 4 picks, while Chicago will get 16 picks total. Teams who decide to pass in the first round or pass twice in consecutive rounds will be excluded from the rest of the dispersal draft. And that's just the dispersal draft. For the expansion draft, only Chicago will be allocated to select players from the expansion draft pool. It will occur in the third round consolidated format, with Chicago picking 10 players out of the expansion pool. 55 players will be placed in the expansion player pool. Each existing MLR team will have to nominate 5 currently contracted MLR players, including a standard contract player at least, by the deadline of November 6th. No existing team will lose more than 3 players to Chicago, and no existing team will lose more than 2 players in the same position. Chicago will have a signing window between November 11th and the 1st of December, where they have to finalize the signings with expansion draftees. Any player not signed with Chicago after December 1st will be sent back to their previous team who nominated the player. And so there's John has a Excel basically explaining how the dispersal pick will go. And basically in every round of the dispersal draft, Chicago will have the first 2 picks, the final 2 picks, and then the central pick as well. Toronto has their draft picks being the 7th pick in round 1, the 10th pick in round 2, and then the 7th pick in round 4, and the 10th pick in round 5 as well. So those are the picks. It's interesting. And this is the thing, because it's behind closed doors, there may already be deals going on that we won't know about until the 10th, although they'll probably come up on the MLR trade wire of teams wanting to trade for, player rights or international slots or things like that. But in total, it means that Chicago will get a total of 30 picks from this draft. So basically, they could get their entire squad.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably the purpose of this and stuff, right? Yeah. Fill out the roster. I think a couple of things I kind of think are interesting before we get into the probably bigger story surrounding this is, so, I mean, obviously, if you're an Austin or LA player, I guess you want to play, I guess you have to declare for the draft because I don't know, unless you plan on signing halfway through the year. So that kind of stinks, I guess. But either way, the one thing I do find kind of really interesting about this is for the expansion draft element, with teams having to give up or make a couple players eligible here, but to kind of have it end with any player not signed with Chicago after December 1st will be sent back to their previous team. So for all these players that if they get picked by Chicago, they can just be no and go back. So that's kind of an interesting wrinkle. I guess though, I said last week that I was I really want the league to do something with the expansion draft. Because it's I think this is really cool. It's going to be an awesome marketing thing. It could be an awesome marketing thing. Could be really cool because no other league has really had a dispersal draft and stuff. Right. Because teams are folding or no longer in it. I guess combining it with an expansion draft, it's something that no other team's done. We went through a list of players that are on LA and Austin. We're there's a lot of exciting players on those teams. And, I was this would be a really cool thing to do. And I guess I didn't take into consideration the players' feelings on this at all. Cause, through the US.
Yeah.
What is it? The USA RPA or US
The US Rugby Players
Rugby Players
Association.
Association, USRPA. So through that, they've obviously the players in MLR have come up with a couple of statements, which I think is incredibly noteworthy, just given how frequently players are kind of sharing that statement right now.
Yeah.
That includes like not just LA and Austin players, but players throughout the league and like big players too, like guys that are on the Canadian and US national team or like team captains in MLR. So
Yeah.
obviously players aren't too thrilled about that. Stu, you want to get into their statement a little bit?
Yeah. So earlier on November the 4th, the USRPA put out this statement saying our MLR players express significant concerns where the league's proposed expansion and dispersal draft process will negatively affect player welfare, including saying that MLR teams must nominate 5 currently contracted players, including standard contract players as well. The league had not informed any players of their intention to hold this draft. Any player can be placed onto the expansion draft by the team. A player who has very recently agreed a 2023 deal with a team, or a player whose contract has ended after 22 but is still unilaterally designated by the league as alumni restricted, may be drafted by the Chicago team without any advance notice. And it's likely that many of the players who are drafted are part-time associate contract players who receive hourly minimum wage and they hold jobs outside of MLR. And they will be required to move to Chicago for the same part-time hourly wages and then have to try and secure new secondary employment in the city. And it just comes back to the thing that's been the crux of this entire issue. There just hasn't been any communication between the league to the players, never mind the fans. And now they're being basically given 6 days to decide whether they wish to continue playing in the MLR for an unspecified team through the dispersal draft. So from this statement, there has come a specific set of 3 things that the US RPA wants to do. So it says, if the MLR does decide to hold the draft on November 10th, we would encourage them to consider the following solutions to mitigate potential player welfare concerns. 1, a guarantee that previous housing and ancillary benefits will be honored for players picked in both drafts. Number 2, a percentage of each player's salary to be excluded from the 2023 salary cap, which includes the housing and ancillary benefits. And number 3, the development of all future policies affecting players through the collective bargaining process. Mm-hmm. So now this has been pushed by a lot of players, such as
there's a lot of players.
Luke Carty and Nick Savetta. Although I will say Nick Savetta is on the board of the US RPA, as I think he's like the chairman of it. So obviously,
I mean, in general, though, like especially,
but yeah, a lot of players, a lot of supporters are agreeing that this does make sense. Journalists as well, and it's hard to argue against it. It does seem that it seems unreasonable to ask a player that's been playing essentially in their hometown to relocate to another city, find new employment. A lot of players have family as well. Will they have to move as well? Will they be able to move as well? It's definitely something to be considered. The first 2 points they've made of previous housing and ancillary benefits to be honored for the drafted players and a percentage of each drafted player's salary to be excluded from the salary cap. I think that's entirely reasonable for the MLR to enact to ensure that these players' welfare standards can be met. The only issue I have, and this may just be because I don't know enough about the USRPA, is the collective bargaining for all future developments, because the USRPA is, as the name suggests, the Players Association for USA rugby players. Mm-hmm. But when one of your teams in MLR is Canadian, and is strictly focused on developing Canadian talent. They've only had one American player on their team, and that was literally due to resources beyond their control. I think that it can be argued that the US RPA isn't or possibly shouldn't be the deciding voice for MLR players' welfare. And now that's not to say that they can't have a stake in it, because I also know there's the Canadian Rugby Players Association as well. So
I think,
and that's the thing, is that so I don't believe they've put out a statement yet. And we talked about it last week. There's 6 players from
I think
LA that are Canadian.
Yeah,
but will their voices be acknowledged? I know it's easy to say that, but then you also have, what about the international players that signed multi-year deals with LA?
To me,
are they allowed to be represented as well, or do they need a separate body?
No, I think what it's like, looking at the USRPA website, one of the things it says, like, in the who we are thing, is it's like it says that we are currently seeking recognition from Major League Rugby to initiate similar relationships with the league. I think, to me, what this seems like, and what it would be like in other sports, that third point, in saying that they would like to create like a collective bargaining agreement. Because one, like, I get what you're saying, and obviously they have the words United States in their organization. One, like, there's a lot of Canadian players reposting, retweeting, sharing the stories on Instagram stuff. There's a lot of Canadian players that are like repeating this message. So at the very least, they agree with it. But two, I think, to me, when I see that they want to develop, like, a collective bargaining agreement, that, to me, I think that implies to me, could be wrong, right, that it's like they want to create like what basically every other league in North America has, being like the players associations, like the NHLPA, the MLBPA, NFLPA. Like, there's a lot of players associations, and I think that's kind of where they're more going for. And based on what how those leagues work, is you're in the association if you play one game. Right. So I think from that, it's like, I think when they're saying they want to create a collective bargaining process, that I'm guessing, or I'm assuming, that they're probably trying to look for something similar to what other leagues have, as far as like in this players association that would represent all the players. And like, it looks like, at the very least, regardless of where those players are from or where those players kind of are located, it looks like, I mean, you can just look at the likes, the retweets, all the Instagram shares and stuff. It seems like this is, at the very least, which is probably a good thing for the players in the league, is that the players are at least kind of showing like a united front on this situation, which is probably a good thing for the players. Not too many players that are coming out saying that they're super stoked about this draft. That's going to happen.
Yeah.
So the players are kind of showing a united front on this. The 3 points that they want to make are the like you said, like, one makes a lot of sense. Players that sign contracts get their contract that they agree to. That makes sense. 2, the percentage of players' salary be excluded from the salary cap. Makes sense. Hilariously ironic, but makes sense. Given that this whole thing started.
Yeah. I get it. Yeah.
So kind of ironic, but makes sense. And yeah, so I mean, I don't know. Interesting to see how this whole situation ends up playing out. I do wonder though, like, because I genuinely, like, I don't know how much power this organization has. Even with like USA Rugby, or even within the MLR, within USA Rugby, or anything at all, how much power this organization actually has. I genuinely don't know, but it's kind of interesting to see that, despite this league only going into its 6th year, that it seems like there's, at the very least, it seems like there's an appetite for the players to get something a little bit more in lines of like a really formal, like, I guess, a formal collective bargaining agreement and players association within the league. So that to me is probably the most interesting part. The one thing though that I am curious about though, like, because a lot of what their statement is saying is that like players don't want to be like just are told to be in like uprooting their lives on like 3 weeks notice, or nobody knows where they're going to play or whatever. But the rules that John Hooley posted seem to indicate that they have the option of saying no,
Yeah,
to a certain extent anyways.
yeah.
So there's I think that just might come back to part of the thing where it's like I think in this whole situation we're getting a lot of he said she said stuff
Yeah,
kind of happening.
I think it doesn't help that this is
I'm
behind closed doors as well.
Yeah,
so.
and I'm not saying that like the players I'm just, it's like I think like those points that seem to contradict each other a little bit. I think the players are, I think, probably within their right to try to set up some sort of way to represent themselves in the league.
Yeah.
So I think that like that would ultimately be a good thing. And just because at least it just seems like maybe they just didn't get enough of a say in how this process plays out and are
I think it does come back to the main issue of communication between the league and the players has been minimal at best.
Well, even at that, like there's been no public like MLR statement like about the US. But again, like I just don't know, like are they just like I don't know what, like, because they're obviously like they want to be recognized by the MLR, right? So that means they're not. So maybe the MLR doesn't feel like they need to address it because it's not.
And
I don't know. It'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see what happens with this whole.
Well, if any player is getting drafted, we hope that everything turns out for the best. We hope that you're able to continue your rugby career if you see fit, and we hope that stars align and things all work. But I think we're going to end it there. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed listening to this episode of the podcast, you can listen to more on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Anchor FM. If you like watching videos of the podcast as well as additional footage, you can do so on our YouTube channel at Rouge Rugby, and we are available across social media, including Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Again, at Rouge Rugby. Derek, where can the fine people find you?
At Brissette the Jet across all social media platforms.
And you can find me at Hardman, spelled H4RDMAN, again, across all social media platforms. Well, Derek, thank you very much for joining me. I know we'll both be looking forward to the bronze final, where we're hoping that Canada can break that duck against France in previous fixtures and at least walk away with the bronze medals. And thank you all for joining us for another episode of the Le Rouge Rugby podcast, talking about real Canadian rugby. We hope you can join us again next time.